Well, to trending now. There's something about the Queen's address that still bothers me. The commercial networks all covered it live this morning, but the ABC, our allegedly national broadcaster, did not. On one ABC channel, it had a rerun of Lateline, on another, a rerun of Insiders. Far more important. Although after a big fuss online, it did say, oh, well, we'll replay the speech tonight, 12 hours late. Joining me is Daisy Cousens, a YouTube star who runs her own video channel. Daisy, it's wonderful to catch up with you. What did you make of that decision by our national broadcaster not to run a special address from a woman who is, after all, Queen of this country too?
Well, it was such poor form, Andrew. I mean, oh my goodness. I mean, first of all, I would really think, I'd hazard a guess, that your average Australian would much prefer to hear an address from the Queen than some sort of random left-wing chat show repeat of a program. I mean, for goodness sake. And second of all, like it or not, you know, as much of those as those Republicans that populate the ABC might hate it, the Queen is still Australia's head of state. And as the taxpayer-funded broadcaster, you know, funded by the Australian taxpayers' hard-earned dollars, then I would think they should be obligated and indeed feel privileged to broadcast to Australians a message from Australia's head of state. I mean, surely, to me, that's just stating the bleeding obvious. Especially in this time of great public distress, when people are looking for sources of hope and comfort and guidance, all of which the Queen provides.
I would have thought so. I mean, it is supposedly the national broadcast. It might take its national responsibilities, including to national symbols, a little more carefully. Let's talk about how the social media is handling this crisis. There's been, well, let's lighten it up. There's been a very interesting split of the very left-wing Faruqi family, which is obsessed with victim politics. Here is the Green Senator, Mehreen Faruqi, claiming that the virus is a gender issue.
Let us not forget that COVID-19 is a gendered crisis. Nurses, nurse aides, teachers, child carers and early childhood educators, aged care workers and cleaners are mostly women.
Now, actually, Daisy, if there's a gender issue here, it's the fact that this virus actually kills more men. So why didn't she complain about men? But Faruqi's son, former ABC editor Osman, says, no, the virus exposes not sexism, but our racism. He tweeted, COVID-19 cases and spreaders are overwhelmingly middle, upper class and white. And those being policed are the most poor and black and brown. Daisy, how does this coronavirus analysis of Osman Faruqi work when we consider China, Iran, Indonesia, India and Africa? Are they also the spreaders overwhelmingly white and middle class?
Well, no, most definitely not. And I think we can all agree that Osman is just being a teeny little bit short-sighted here with this analysis. And what he reveals is that despite all of his talk of, you know, racial oppression in Australia, despite Australia being one of the most tolerant and racially inclusive countries in the world, he's just revealed again that he is part of that kind of progressive media elite who is just so inherently privileged that they can afford to view the coronavirus crisis solely through the lens of identity. And in this case, of course, it's race and also class. And it's exactly the same with Mehreen Faruqi. Again, that spiel she gave about it being allegedly a gendered crisis only serves to prove that she is so privileged she can also afford to view the crisis purely through the lens of identity, in this case gender. And as you pointed out, that's really misguided, because as we all knew at the time she made this speech, you are much more likely to get sick and die from the coronavirus if you are a man than a woman. So this is sort of symbolic, Andrew, of the social justice movement in its death throes. You know, it's in my opinion, it's political opportunism, because no one is paying as much attention to social justice, you know, progressive causes as they were before the virus, because people are interested in more important things nowadays.
Yeah, I can just imagine the Faruqi family paying a visit to the Dorothy Henderson Lodge and saying, well, who here is white and who here is a woman? You know, these are the issues here. You know, instead of thinking, look, this is suffering and we don't get, you know, we just leave that victim politics to one side and actually just react with compassion, common sense. Now, the virus has sure done wonders for the Prime Minister's approval ratings because they took an absolute hammering, of course, in the bushfires. Well, today's Newspoll, Daisy, shows that he now has the highest satisfaction rating since Kevin Rudd at the height of the global financial crisis 11 years ago. But we know how that ended, of course, for him. And Morrison's now leading Labor leader Anthony Albanese's preferred Prime Minister by a massive 53% to 29%. How is social media taking this news?
Oh, they're not taking it well, Andrew. Let me tell you, the lefty lovies on Twitter are really not happy. There has been an outpouring of rage on Twitter on the hashtag Newspoll tag since all of this happened, because they can't seem to accept that beyond their little kind of bubble of left-wing Twitter activism, that there are people out there who, shock horror, have different opinions to them. I mean, how outrageous. There's diversity of opinion in Australia, and there were a number of different takes. I mean, first was the take that the poll couldn't possibly have been conducted properly. There was one gentleman who said that he felt that maybe if they'd asked a few more Twitter users their opinions, then possibly the results wouldn't have been so exaggerated. That was one take. Then, of course, there was the take that the poll was rigged. It was completely rigged. And another woman put forward very vehemently that since she personally had never been asked to do a news poll, then, oh, absolutely, the results must be fake. They must be picking people to push their evil agenda. And then, of course, there is the typical take that people like to call Murdoch derangement syndrome.
Oh, yes, it's always Murdoch.
Always Murdoch, yes. The idea, the notion that this poll comes from an organisation that is owned by Rupert Murdoch must absolutely mean that this is just propaganda from the Murdoch evil conservative agenda to brainwash the general public and make them believe evil conservative Murdoch-related things. But the take that I found particularly interesting, Andrew, was the pro-socialist take. There were a number of left-wing commentators who were sort of celebrating and quite smug because they believed that since this result, this positive result, came straight after Scott Morrison had delivered a what they call sort of radically socialist welfare sort of stimulus policies, then that must indicate that Australians broadly support radical socialist economic policies. And this, of course, is wishful thinking and entirely off base, because if Australians broadly supported radical socialist policies, then the Greens would be in power. You know, they would have been voted in the last election. What this is indicative of, I think, is that Australians support the government putting their money, which is the taxpayers' money, where their mouths are, since the way the government decided to handle the COVID-19 crisis was to literally put countless people out of work, tank the economy, close businesses, lock us all in our homes, and prevent a lot of people from earning a living. So the least they can do, even though it's excessive, is give people a bit of money to help them through. I mean, for better or for worse, this is how they have decided to handle COVID-19, possibly for all the reasons you've mentioned, Andrew, and I fully agree with you. It possibly is for the worse on a number of levels. But yeah, to say that this is indicative of Australia suddenly embracing socialism is really quite silly.
Well, I just would caution the government that now that it has rolled out these programs, when it tries to pull them back, they may find that the public is very keen on free money. And it might be the situation like with Winston Churchill, you know, that wins the battle of Europe, of World War II, wins, you know, the European war, and the public throw him out because Labor will deal better with the socialist state that he imposed. So there's a caution. Daisy Cousens, thank you so much indeed for your time.